Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Volume 2 of Akira. Now, Akira is a 6-volume manga series which was written and illustrated by Katsuhiro Otomo, and the manga series was published between 1982 and 1990. Now, this manga series is perhaps most famous for being the basis for the 1988 animated film of the same name. And both the manga and the anime were extremely influential. Now, I already reviewed Volume 1 of Akira back in September, and I'll leave a link to that review in the description below, so if you haven't already, check out my review of Volume 1 of this series. Now, the basic plotline of this manga series overall is it's set 38 years after World War III, and Japan is now under the control of a very corrupt government, and the city of Tokyo, which was destroyed in the beginning of World War III, is now replaced with Neo-Tokyo, which is a city plagued by gang violence and anti-government terrorism. And it turns out that for years the Japanese government has been doing experiments on psychic children, and that may have had something to do with what caused World War III to begin with. And the main villain of this series is this emotionally disturbed teenage boy named Tetsuo, who in Volume 1 started to develop telekinetic powers. And in this volume, you realize that Tetsuo is quickly developing into an extremely powerful psychic, and it's getting to a point where maybe nobody will be able to control him. So, the plot of Volume 2 of Akira is it begins where Tetsuo's former best friend, Kaneda, and this girl, Kei, who is part of this underground resistance against the government, they're both arrested by the Japanese military. And this government organization that has been experimenting on psychic children, they offer Tetsuo the chance to work with them so they could help develop his psychic powers. But it turns out that Tetsuo starts giving them way more than they bargained for. And one of these psychic children has this premonition that Akira is going to come back. Now, I don't want to give away who or what Akira is, but Akira is something that the Japanese government has been keeping a secret for all these years since World War III, and Akira has been asleep since World War III, but one of these psychic children has this premonition that Akira will come back, and it will be devastating when he comes back. And Tetsuo eventually learns of Akira, and he now wants to awaken him. And in the story, Kaneda and Kei eventually escape, and now they have to stop Tetsuo before it's too late. And I don't want to give too much away, but in this volume, it appears that Kei might actually have psychic powers as well. Now, so far, I've only read the first 2 volumes of Akira, but so far, I'm really loving this series, and I still really like the movie, but I am noticing that the movie definitely condensed a lot, and it definitely changed a lot. But that's somewhat understandable because there was only so much they could put into one movie, and the movie did come out before the manga series was even finished, and I still really like the movie, but I could see why hardcore fans of this comic book series are somewhat resistant towards the film. Now, this particular volume of Akira moved at a very brisk pace, like almost from beginning to end it was non-stop action. At the same time though, it still doesn't skip out in the ideas department. Like, even though it was almost non-stop action, this is still very much a thought-provoking piece of science fiction. Like, this is actually a very political story, and I would say in a lot of ways the character of Akira is very much a metaphor for the atom bomb. And in a lot of ways, I would actually draw a comparison between this manga series and the original Godzilla, because this series, very much like the original Godzilla film, is very much a commentary on post-World War II Japan. Like, obviously, the two stories make a commentary on post-war Japan in very different ways. Like, the original Godzilla came out less than 10 years after World War II, and that was very much making a commentary on post-World War II Japan of the 1950s, and this comic book series was written in the 80s, and this is very much making a commentary of Japan at that time. So obviously the two stories are making a commentary on post-war Japan in very different ways, but I would say they are very similar in a lot of ways as well, because the titular characters from both stories are really metaphors for the destructive nature of the nuclear bomb. Now, I don't know if Otomo had the original Godzilla film in mind when he wrote this series, but I personally see some parallels between the two stories, because the two stories do deal with a lot of similar themes and ideas, and once again, both stories are making a commentary on both the nuclear bomb and post-World War II Japan. And in the story, there's this scientist who actually starts to listen to Tetsuo when Tetsuo says that he wants to wake up Akira, because this scientist believes that if they could somehow control Akira, it would be a huge scientific breakthrough. But all this scientist is thinking about is his own scientific curiosity, and he's not thinking about the real human consequences of what will happen if Akira wakes up again. And you could very much tie this in with the people who made the atom bomb without even thinking about the kind of devastation that the atom bomb could cause. So if you think about what Akira is supposed to be an allegory for, then this is an intensely political story. So yeah, I highly recommend Volume 2 of Akira if you haven't read it already, but of course you have to read Volume 1 before you read this one, and I definitely recommend Volume 1 as well. And once again, so far I've only read the first 2 volumes of this series, but so far I'm really digging this series, and I'm definitely excited to see where this series goes after this. And I will get to reading the other volumes of this series eventually, but there are a lot of other books that I'm currently reading at the moment. But yeah, that was my review on Volume 2 of Akira by Katsuhiro Otomo, and bye.